Good day everyone. With 1.6 around the corner, and hopefully with it, the reaction buffs mentioned in miHoYo's developer notes, I wanted to quickly talk about them and give my thoughts as to what I think these changes will bring, as honestly, I'm a little confused by the response that at least I have seen. I'm going to focus on the Electro reactions specifically, as I think these so-called Electro buffs could actually lower some Electro characters in the meta, while raising some others. To start, let's just quickly take a look at the stated changes from the developer's notes. I'm sure you've already seen these by now, but to sum them up, they mention an increase to the damage that major reactions deal with characters above level 60 by some unknown amount, and that Elemental Mastery will further increase these reactions' damage by again an unknown amount. The main point I wanted to bring up from this is that the only stated changes are unknown damage increases with no changes to how the reactions function in any way. So to get an idea of what these changes could actually bring, we could quickly look through the reactions to try to get an idea. But first, let's take a look at some reverse vaporize numbers so that we can see what these changes have to compete with. To show some realistic reverse vaporize numbers, so no million damage nuke type shenanigans, we'll be looking at the first normal hit and the charged attack hit of a pretty low elemental mastery Hu Tao. And while Hu Tao is a very strong character, as you can see, mine is C0 and is using a white tassel, a 3-star weapon. With no other buffs or enemy debuffs, if you have a Hu Tao, you should be able to at least get these numbers, and if you don't, you can compare these numbers to whatever reverse melt / vaporize character you are, or could be, using. Now as we can see, without vaporize, her first normal attack crits for about 6,500. But if we vaporize, we can get about 12,500, roughly 6,000 additional damage. For charge attacks, we see about 14,500 without vaporize, and then with vaporize, we get 29,400, a damage increase of nearly 15,000. So even without much elemental mastery, the weak version of vaporize nearly doubles Hu Tao's damage, adding 6,000 to her first normal hit, and 15,000 to a charged attack. If you were to give Hu Tao a better weapon than a 3-star, had other team members to buffer damage and debuff enemies and so on, since vaporize is just an additional damage multiplier, the damage it would add would only increase. Now that we have an idea on what Electro reactions are essentially competing against, let's now take a look at them and see what a damage increase could do. To this, we will be using my level 80 Kaching with similar elemental mastery to my Hu Tao. Superconduct. As we all know, Superconduct deals a small amount of AoE cryo damage and reduces the enemy's physical resistance, which is great for a physical build, but doesn't really do anything for Electro units that aren't built for physical damage. Now as we can see, Superconduct is doing about 550 damage. Now I don't know about you, but I rather doubt that Superconduct's damage is going to get multiplied by 11. I could be wrong, would imagine it would get multiplied by 2 or 3 at best. And so let's say that Superconduct gains a 200% damage increase, and now does like 1,650 damage. Is that going to be something worth building for? Is that going to compete against a Vaporize or a Reverse Melt build? I don't think so. If all that is changed is a damage increase, I think that Superconduct will pretty much remain as it is, a debuff against enemies for physical characters. Superconduct out of the way, next let's look at the potentially highest damage dealing Electro reaction, Overloaded. Overloaded deals AoE pyro damage and has a strong knockback. As we can see, with the same character and stats, that Overloaded deals 2,200 damage. Now if Overloaded is possibly the highest damage dealing Electro reaction, why isn't Zhengling in every Kaching, Razor, Beidou comp? Well, because Overloaded causes strong knockback, each time you cause Overloaded, results in interrupting your combos to waste stamina to chase after your enemies over and over and over again. And as in the game's current state, practically all the enemies that you meet in, say, the Abyss, are susceptible to knockback, like pretty much everything that doesn't have a shield up and isn't of the Ruin Guard series. So if the reason that people generally do not use Overloaded with a melee Electro character is due to the knockback, forcing them to constantly chase after their enemies instead of being able to hit them, if all that changes is a damage increase, Will anything really change? The damage increase to Overloaded would have to be enough to justify your melee Electro carry not being able to hit the enemy a lot of the time. So once again, I don't really see Overloaded helping bridge the gap between melee Electro characters versus others, and so melee Electro characters would still only have one usually usable reaction, Electrocharged. Now, if you may have noticed, I repeatedly specified melee Electro characters, and we will get to that at the end of speaking about Electrocharged. So Electrocharged, I believe, is generally the most used reaction for Electro carries, as it does more damage than Superconduct, but doesn't have the drawback that Overload has. And to top it off is Electro damage, so if you say decrease enemies' Electro resistance, for your Electro carry, you will also be increasing your Electrocharge's damage as well. As we can see here, Electrocharged is dealing about 1,300 damage per tick. Now while this is better than Superconduct, it still needs a massive increase in order to be at all comparable to even reverse Vaporize. However, the most interesting aspect of Electrocharge in my opinion is when Hydro is the trigger for the reaction, as this causes a short dot, but much more importantly, causes the enemies to have both Hydro and Electro applied to them at the same time. So if you're then hit with a Pyro attack, you cause both Overloaded and Reverse Vaporize at the same time. This means that instead of doing just a single reaction, you're essentially getting Electrocharged, Overloaded, and Reverse Vaporize for the price of one. And if Electrocharge and Overloaded get, say, 100% damage boost, you're getting the damage amplification of Vaporize, the 2,600 damage of Electrocharged, and the 4,400 damage from Overload without any buffs or additional elemental mastery. That seems to me like a really high damage comp, and any character that could pull it off would be really good. But there's an issue. We already discussed that Overloaded is generally bad for melee Electro characters, as it makes it difficult to consistently hit the enemies. And with such a group, you would want to be overloading all the time. This brings us to why I kept mentioning melee Electro characters, as this isn't really an issue for ranged Electro characters like, say, Lisa. Because Lisa is ranged, she doesn't really have to be right up next to the enemy, so if it gets knocked away a few times, it isn't really a big deal. Just dashing forward to animation cancel the last hit of her normal attack combo would be good enough. Fischl could also be used in a similar way, just making sure to resummon Oz every once in a while. And that's why I think these changes could actually lower melee Electro characters in the meta, because sure, Electrocharge does slightly more damage now, but why do that when you could use a ranged character to pull an Electrocharged, Overload, Reverse Vaporize comp, outside of course from just using a character purely because you like them. That's the issue that I'm a little concerned about, that these changes might make ranged Electro characters have a spot in a very strong team comp, whereas melee Electro characters get left behind. On the flip side, however, that would make Lisa a potentially much more desired unit, and everyone can get her. And that kind of wraps up all I wanted to say about the developer note changes. I just wanted to get this out there in case what I think holds to be true, and this video can hopefully bring people's expectations back down to earth, I guess. And if I'm overlooking something or just completely confused about something, then someone could maybe kindly let me know. That'd be great. And so with that, we reached the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Please do let me know down below what you think will happen with these changes, and I hope you all have a great day.